if you want to start, Rene, then we start.
Yep.
Okay, and again, Martina will join us, I think, in half an hour. So let's see how it goes. And this is a user group, so we can do it very interactively, whatever you prefer. So if you have any questions, please shoot anytime. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, good. So not too many people online here today. We've got the problem that we've got 3 concurrent user group sessions. Somehow, I think that never happened before.
Wow.
The max was 2 running concurrently. So today we've got the data guys meeting, we've got Azure meeting, and we've got us. So, but Reward is streaming to YouTube, so there might be a few more people watching there.
Sure. If you like, you can also record it, Rene.
Yeah. Either way, so 7:33 now, so I think we can get started. So everyone, good evening. Thank you for coming. We've got 2 sessions today. So we've got Toni in Austria, who's going to talk about Power Platform governance, and I'll do a short recap, short summary of what are the major announcements of Microsoft Ignite afterwards. So my session will be relatively short, I think maybe 30 minutes or so only, because I'm mostly just referring to things that were announced, not doing much demo or so. And Toni, that means you can spend as much time as you want, so there's no time limit for you. If you want to talk the next 1.5 hours, go ahead, feel free. But yeah, if there are any questions coming up, I think then you want to do Q&A at the end, or do you want to in between? I think at the end.
At the end would be maybe easier, but yeah. However it comes.
Yeah, okay, then we just do it that way. It might be easier then. Okay, and with that, I can hand over to you already then.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So yeah. I will share my screen in a second. So hopefully this works. Can you see my screen? No, not now, but hopefully now.
Yes.
Okay, great. So first of all, thanks for the invitation, Rene, to speak here at your user group. It's always great to at least virtually see you and Revolt and all the other guys. I still remember being in Singapore last, I think it was in January 2019 or so. It was a great experience. I'm always a little bit jealous of you guys because I really like the city and I like the climate and everything there. So I want to talk a little bit about Power Apps and governance. And again, I have a co-presenter, that's Martina. She is currently out of the office, unfortunately, but she will join a little bit later for a Q&A at least. So let's see how it goes. So my name is Toni. I'm located in Austria. As you can see by my email address, it's @work.at. That's also my company. So we are specialized in doing consulting, IT consulting in the Microsoft 365 environment and in Microsoft Azure. And I'm an MVP for Azure and for Office development. And my colleague Martina, she's MVP for Office 365, or as it's called, Office and App Service, and Azure as well. And I have my contact data at the end as well. So the reason why I want to talk about governance, because that's a very hot topic right now with our customers. And I have prepared this short presentation here, and I will show you some demos as well, because many customers now discover the Power Platform. And they say, well, often they have a kind of Wild West in their current environment. So they have existing Power Apps, existing flows. They have no idea what's running. They have no idea what's important in their environments. And this is a little bit about the management. How can you organize this, well, let's say, Power Platform tools for your organization? Then I have some use cases. I want to show some demos of Power Apps, when it's maybe a good idea to use Power Apps and when it's maybe a better approach to develop a custom application or something. And of course, everything here goes into governance. We need to have some governance tools. And These governance tools can be PowerShell, for example. I have some samples for that, or can be the Center of Excellence, for example. And of course, there's a lot of other tools out there you can use. So that's my idea. If you have any questions, please simply shoot anytime, or we can go through that at the end. So the first part is just about the Power Platform. I'm sure you all are familiar with that slide. Just as a very short recap, because the Power Virtual Agents came to the Power Platform with Ignite 2019, as far as I remember, and the rest has already been in the Power Platform, which means Power BI for visualizations. It's a great tool we use in many projects with our customers to say, okay, we have the data in a SQL Server, for example, but please use Power BI to get your, let's say, reports or dashboards out of that. Power Apps is a very cool tool from my perspective, a low-code, no-code environment for many scenarios, not for all of them, but we will come to that later. And of course, Power Automate. In my case, I prefer to do flows in Logic apps because they have some benefits, but for personal usage, Power Automate from my perspective is great. And again, the Power Virtual Agents, I like them basically because they provide a very nice method to create bots without coding. But on the other side, to be honest, it's a little bit expensive to use that service. Anyway, these services are powered by data connectors, so which means we have premium and standard connectors where we can connect to a SQL Server, to a SAP system, to a HTTP service or something. We can use the HI builder in the platform to say I want to create my own bot, and we have the common data service, which is important for some application or some types of applications. So for example, for our Center of Excellence, we'll come to that later. Okay, that's just the overview, the slide you all know. When we talk about management of the Power Platform, well, everything is organized in a so-called environment. And in the environments, they live the flows, they live the Power Apps, they live the connectors, and also DLP policies. And we can have multiple environments. So how can you manage that? So with that, I'm almost done here with the slides, at least for now, because we want to have a look how this portal looks like, what you can do in here. And that's the short form, the AK.ms Power Platform Admin Center. So that this is it. So let me open that and go to, yeah, by the way, of course, you can also reach it if you go to the Power Platform, makepowerapps.com, you sign in here. You also have that in the menu here in the top right corner if you have the Power Platform administrative permission. So that would be the admin center, but you can also reach it very fast with AKMS like PPAC. I personally like the short form links, like for example, what's also very useful is ak.ms/graph or GE for the Graph Explorer, etc. So I like this short URL shorteners here. Okay, so this is the admin center where I can manage as an administrator my environment. So I have everything organized in environments here. By default, you always have a default environment. So that's the one that's existing in every Office 365 tenant here. So this means everything you create, for example, in the SharePoint list will, every Power App or every flow will be stored in the default environment. That's maybe not the best approach, but this is how it is currently. So Microsoft doesn't give you any option to remove that or to remove the permissions here. So every user who has access to the Power Apps platform has access to the default environment. But you can create your own environment. So for example, I've created this dev environment here. And here you can see the properties of that. So for example, I can go into edit here. And you can see one important thing here is that we only allow a specific security group to create or to use that environment here. And that would be my recommendation, to really define your environments for the specific purpose and to add the security for that, for a specific security group. In my case, it's called Power Apps. That's our company name, and then Power Apps. And I can change it to another group. Also, I can change the name and the URL. And we see the type here, and there are 2 types available, or actually there are, I think, 4 or 5 types. But in here, this is of type sandbox, which means I can convert an environment between sandbox and production, and there's a developer and a trial type of environment. One thing I would recommend here to go to the gear icon in the top right corner and click on the Power Platform settings when talking about governance, because there's one important thing you should do right at the beginning. This is actually my first recommendation, because you should switch that who can create environments and production and sandbox environments from everyone to specific administrators only. So that's maybe the best approach to start with that. So not everyone in my organization is allowed to create an environment. And then you can see we have an extra switch for trial environments as well. So that would be the first step. The second step would be to go to the environments and create new environments as you need it. So you can see in my sample here, I have the default environment, which I can only rename but cannot remove. So if I click on that here and I click on edit here, you would see this is the default environments, but I cannot do anything here. I cannot assign a security group. So that's really the exception here. But the second step would be to create your environment by simply clicking the new button if you have the permission. Say, okay, this has a specific name here. This is a specific type. Here we have the types. Again, we can switch between the types later anytime. The difference is just that you have, let's say, more resources, you can control that as well. And that's important, where is the environment hosted? So usually I'm located in Europe, in Austria, so I of course would choose Europe. You in your case of course would choose another location near you, so which means all my data is stored in that region, in that data centers Microsoft provides here. Okay, this is also important, create a database for the environment. So if you say, I want to create Power Apps with using the common data service, then you would have to switch it on or off, but you can do it later anytime. When talking about this here, so we already saw that would be my second or my third recommendation, always create a security group and say only specific persons are allowed to see this environment here. When we go here to the backups, you also can backup and restore environments, which means all the Power Apps, all the flows, all the environment variables, all the solutions that are in that environment can be backed and restored in another tenant, for example, or duplicated or something like this. So that's very useful here. What's also useful or important to know here, if we go to the resources in the admin center, we go to capacity, we see that how much capacity do I have? And here on the right side, you see how is the capacity calculated. So we see there's a storage capacity. In my case, it's 22 gigabytes for databases. Whenever you create an environment, you need at least 1 gigabyte storage of database. That's used for the internal management of this environment. So keep in mind, you cannot create endless environments. That's also from a government perspective, not the best idea, but you need to have the storage. In my case, if you have a tenant, you by default get this 10 gigabyte. And then depending on the user licenses you have in that tenant, every user scores with, some licenses. I think it's 500, 250 megabyte or 500 megabyte or something like this. And this in total gives this capacity for the database. Then we need to have logs and we need to have some space for files. This is all backup, or let's say the back end for that is the Microsoft Dynamics environment. So if you need more capacity, you have to buy licenses for that. So there are specific licenses, and then you see, okay, how are my licenses my storage, how is my storage used by which environment here? So that's also important to keep in mind, that the environments need to have the capacity behind that. Okay, another thing that's important here from a management perspective is the data policies. So here you can define which connectors are allowed in which environment. And that's also, from my perspective, very important to create such policies. So for example, if you look at the developer policy, you can see I have 3 policies defined. If I go to the policies, we see we have a name here. Here we decide which kind of data connectors can be used in that or in specific environments. This is defined here in the 4th step here. So here we see all the connectors by default in here. So for example, if I filter for Microsoft connectors, then you see there are some like forms, for example. So I can go in here and say, well, my users in the environments I define later shall be able to use the connector from Microsoft Forms. So I can simply switch that or move that to the business, to the left connectors here. So I do this here, and then I go to business and I see, okay, now there's forms in here. And I see, for example, well, the connector to get data from Twitter, well, that's maybe not business critical or a real business case. I want to move that to non-business. And again, I can go in here and also can move it to blog as well. So this is also important to define what are my users allowed, which data are my users allowed to use here. So we have these 3 categories here. So simply define that as needed. And this means we can, these connectors cannot share data between the categories, which is also important. So if, for example, block a connector, let's say there's a connector to act or box or something, this is not allowed, but the other connectors are allowed, but they are not allowed to exchange data with business. So that's the idea here of the policies. So after I've defined my connectors here, I would say, okay, they shall be applied to specific environments, to all environments, or in my case, for example, or just for 2 environments, I could say, okay, this is also important for this environment, move it to the policy. So then I have 3 policies here that are use that policy, or excuse me, so I have 3 environments using this policy I just defined here. And this is it, and that's also, from my perspective, an important thing to do best before Power Apps or flows are used from your users. Okay, so these are the main things I want to point out in here. If you have any issue here, you can open a support case as well, which is also helpful to say, okay, I have a specific problem, please Microsoft help me. And the last thing here, maybe with the data integration, I think it's in here, that we can use gateways and can connect to data sources in on-premises system. I think, no, this was not the, I think it's in data. Yeah, here it is, manage gateways. We have 2 types of gateways we can use. We can use the on-premises data gateways or the personal gateways, which means I want to connect to data that's installed, for example, on my local machine. Let's say I have an Excel file that's on my machine, and I want to have an agent running on my machine, and so I can connect from a Power App or a flow to this data source. But of course, in that case, the machine must be up and running, and there are these 2 types here. So every user can install, if he has the permission, the on-premises personal gateway as well. Okay, with that, that's just a quick overview over the portal, just as a first step to do some management here. Let's have a look when to use what. And this is a recommendation from my side. When is it a good idea to use Power Apps? And you can see the green check mark here on the right side, which means I have it on all my slides where I say, okay, that's the best practice. And this is actually my summary here. And I want to talk a little bit about access. Or actually, I want to talk about every topic here, but let's start with the access. First of all, if you create a Power application or a flow, every user that is using that, let's say, app must have a local or must have a work account in your tenant, and he or she must have a license. I mean, that's clear for us who are working with Office 365 on a daily basis, but we often come to customers who say, well, I have some vendors, they have 1,000 employees, and I want to create a small application where they get access to my billing or so. I want to do it with a Power App. So the first question here would be, well, does every user here really have an account in your organization, and does he or she have a license? So that's an important thing to consider before creating a Power App or flow working with some data. The next point is standard connectors. So we have the standard connectors and we have premium connectors, and the standard connectors are great for using data that's in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So from my perspective, I usually recommend to create a data policy to say, well, I include every Microsoft connector in here, but I leave out the others or something like this. And it's great if you connect to data that's stored in SharePoint or OneDrive or maybe in Azure Active Directory, like I look up the manager of a person or something like this, I want to send an email from my account. So that's really great to use. The downside here is these connectors have a limitation, and the limitation usually is 500 records max, or SQL Server up to 2,000, or I think also with SharePoint it's possible now to set it up to 2,000, but that's the maximum size a connector can deliver, which means if I have a scenario where I create a Power App and say, I go to a building, and in that building with my mobile phone and the Power App, I have a barcode on every machine there, and I go through that and do some maintenance or so. So check, okay, this machine is okay. I would collect maybe not that much data. I will be fine using or just showing the last 500 records, let's say, of my checklist or so. But if you have, for example, a scenario where you say I have IoT in place, some Azure IoT service, and that collects data from a machine, and the machines send data like air conditioning system sends data or heating every second and says, okay, my temperature is, then you have a lot of data in your database. That could be a SharePoint site, which is maybe not the best approach. That could be a NoSQL database like Cosmos DB. That could be just an Azure table storage, which I like very much for many scenarios, or a SQL Server or something like this. I think we currently have more than 400 connectors after Ignite. So it's always a good idea to see, okay, what kind of connector is it? Is it a standard connector? Is it more or less does it come with the license? Or is it a premium connector? And what's the limitations of these connectors here? So if I have such a scenario with IoT, it's maybe not a good idea to store the data in a SQL Server database, have a Power App and say, I need the last 10,000 records or so, because you simply don't get it. Then you would think about maybe limiting the number of records, or having not a Power App, but a customized app or so, or how is it called? An app that's really made for the phone or so. So there are other approaches, and this is also a thing to consider here as well. So a native app, that was the wording I was actually looking for. The next thing is simple apps. So we have, I'm a big fan of Power Apps, and I started to do a lot with them. But on the other side, I found out, well, it's maybe not a good idea to create a Power App if you have too many screens in that application, or if the application is too complex. So which means Microsoft has a limit of, I think they say it's a good idea to use a Power App up to 500 controls in the full application. Why is that? Well, we know a Power App is nothing else than, let's say, a JSON description, and it's rendered out as a React application on the end client. But if you have too many controls, and every control, every label, every button, every text box is a label here, then the loading time really increases. So also keep in mind that the application shouldn't be too extensive. There shouldn't be too many screens, too many controls. Otherwise, the loading time is really going up. Also with dependencies. So if you have an application, and in that application you say, okay, if I'm user Tony, then I show this and this control. And if there's another user, Martina, then maybe don't show these controls, because she doesn't have permissions to do that. Of course, you can do that with Power Apps, but it's a lot of effort, especially since Power Apps are, from my perspective, for simple scenarios, but it shouldn't be too complex. Another thing I want to point out here is offline scenarios, which means that's also very, very nice thing where I can use Power Apps. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm here in my Power Apps environment. So let's go to, I think I have the device order here, my dev environment. So let's go to the apps. If there are any questions, I simply check here in the meantime. Okay, yeah, music is over. Okay, so let me show you a typical app here. For example, this here, device order demo. Maybe some of you already know this application. That's a typical sample. I think it's from Microsoft, and it was, I saw that for the first time I think in 2016, but it shows very, very nicely what's a typical use case for a Power App. So that's an application, it's called device order. So for a specific location of my organization, say, okay, I'm in this location here, and I need a notebook or I need a computer. So in this location, I can order these objects here. I simply select these two, for example, and in this location, I want to have these objects, and then I can compare them. So that forwards me to the next screen. And here I say, okay, I've selected these devices. I want to work with this device here. And then I simply see my manager here, and that manager generates an error as I see. But anyway, in my case, my manager is Martina with that email address. And I now click on order, and that starts a flow. And the manager gets an approval message and says, okay, the user wants to have this device for that price. I approve it or I deny it. So that's a very nice demo to see. That's a typical use case here. Another thing that's very nice, and I have that in another environment in here, I think, is an offline scenario. So for example, this here, so I click on edit here. Imagine you have an application where a user goes out with a mobile phone or with a tablet, and he needs to collect data where he has no internet access, and then he returns to the company or somewhere where he has internet access, and he now wants to synchronize the data. So this is a simple application I created just to show you how this would work, and because it's a very nice use case for a Power App. So it's this wonderful application here. It's just a one screener, I think, yeah. So I have a SharePoint list behind that, and that SharePoint list just stores a title, which means a name and an email address. So let me show you how the data source looks like. So if I go to the data sources and to the contact list, so edit data, this should redirect me to my sites demo. And this is the data I'm showing in that Power App here. So let's go back. So we have seen, okay, this list here is filled with that. And then we have a list that's called offline. So on the right side, the green is the online data, and the left side is my offline data. And I have a switch here to simulate, am I online or offline? And this here allows me this simple form to create new data. In my case, I create John with a random number and John with email address with a random number here. So let me show you what this does here. So on the right side, we see these 6 entries here we have in the list. It's this one here, and the left side here is empty. So if I create on save, I simply generate a new entry here, new data, whatever it is. So in my case, it's an email address. And it doesn't work here, unfortunately, because actually I wanted to collect that here. Sorry for that. Let me look if the published version works better. Because I wanted the new entry to show up here on the left side, but something broke here. Anyway, so let's have a look what's happening here. So I go back to the edit mode. What I actually wanted to show here is when I click save, what do I do here? So first of all, I create a random number, and then I look at this toggle, are we online or offline? Depending if we are online, then we do a patch for that list and create a new entry here in that online list. If we are offline, then we do this here. We write the data to a collection. The collection is called offline. Then we simply create the data here and say, okay, record temporarily saved. And this list here, the data table offline, has a data source that's called collection offline. So let's see if we have, no, there's nothing in that collection here. So let me just, it worked before, so I tested it, but now I simply create that 2 times. Let's have a look. I think the collection isn't filled here. Yeah, so the collection is empty, but anyway, I don't want to debug it right now, but I think you get the idea here. So we simply write data to a collection if we are offline, or sorry, I think actually it works. I was just too stupid to switch on the connection online or offline, the toggle, sorry for that. So actually it works. So we write the data to this offline collection. So currently, let me clear that a little bit here. So maybe select all except maybe 2 records here so that we have a little bit less here. So we have only 2 records here. I click on refresh here. The refresh button just does what it says. So if I click on that, it says refresh the contact list, which is my SharePoint list on the right side. So this worked well. And now I'm offline. I create a 3rd entry here in that collection here. So if I now click on the sync button, We will transfer the data from our collection, which we can save to our local machine, into the online list here. So if you look back to the demo list here, we see now these 3 new records here. So how does it work? Well, we have seen the save button depending on that switch here, connection, I'm on online or offline, which I simply forgot. Let's have a look at the sync button here. We say if we are not online, then we have nothing to sync. If we are online, then we have this running through this collection and patch the contact list and add our entries in here. So I like this simple demo here just to show that's a very nice use case from my perspective if you work with data that shall be offline. So this means this is a do for me. So simple apps, offline scenarios are perfect for Power Apps, for example. What's also important for my do some guidance for your users, which means provide them with training, provide them with the information. If you create an application, please do it in this environment, test it, and once it's ready, hand it over to the IT department. We deploy it to a production environment or something like this. How long does the application live? How is it going? If I, as IT, for example, see that the application is no longer used, we will come to that with the Center of Excellence later. Okay, we have seen just 2 very short demos here. So when not to use Power Apps. So this is my recommendation when it's maybe not a good idea to use Power Apps or Flow. First of all, the access topic. So if you have external users who don't have access to your tenant, who don't have a device. Again, this scenario with a vendor, for example. The next part is, I already talked about that, premium connectors. So if you need a premium connector, and in the premium connectors, unfortunately, there's also the HTTP connector in it. And the HTTP connector is more or less like the Swiss knife. You need it more or less, or at least I need it more or less every time to do something from another system or from Graph or something like this. So that's a premium connector. So my recommendation here is provide a premium connector license just for key users, not maybe for every user in the organization. If you have 1,000 users in the organization, maybe not every user needs a Power App that accesses data with HTTP or from SAP or something like this. A workaround from my side is, in such cases, I often use, let's say, a SharePoint list or something, write the data to that, and then have, let's say, a logic app or a flow with a premium connector, taking that data and sending that data to another system in the background. So that would be a very nice workaround for the licensing thing here. Also, we have the limitation of the record. So if you say I have an application and I want to modify the data in a Power App, for example, well, then you could create your custom connector. So I have done that as well. So for example, if you need additional functionality, when I say I need 5,000 records from my SQL server, but the standard connector only delivers me 2,000, I have to work with paging. I have to do some extra functionality, like I want to create a PDF in the background or reporting or something like this, want to set permissions. That would be a typical task for a custom connector. We talked about complex applications. So if the application is too large, has too much dependencies, too much permissions, then maybe it's not a good idea to use Power Apps. And the last part here is performance. So Power Apps are no native apps, which means they have some loading time because the zip package has to be loaded, has to be interpreted, and then it has to be rendered. And depending on the number of controls, because actually it's a web form out there, this can take some time. So we had the experience where our customer said, well, I have a large application out there, but it's too slow. What can I do? Well, you cannot do a lot here. So Power Apps provides a ready-to-use framework, but you don't have really a lot of control about behavior in here. Okay, well, of course, you can do working with collections, for example. This is a good recommendation from my side. Okay, so some samples for complex applications. So we had a customer who wanted to have a solution for a project plan. And the designer did something what we see on my screen here. He designed, well, it shall look like this. And we have a lot of screens, which means here I have some phase one with every topic here is a screen with some controls with multiple multi-select drop-downs and so on. We have also permissions here. So if I'm user Tony, for example, I can modify phase 1, but not modify phase 2 and so on. Small things like here, they also wanted to have a kind of history to say, okay, if somebody changes data, I want to see this overview here. Every word that has been changed in a specific screen or in a specific control shall be outlined, shall be marked here, or things like I want to have pop-ups here, and in the pop-ups I want to have WYSIWYG editors and dynamic outcomes, dynamic outputs, for example. So these are, from my perspective, samples where doing this with a Power App is not a good idea. So what we did here, we first of all, we thought we do a Power App for that, and then we said, well, it's too complex for that, and we found out there are too many controls in here. It's just too large for a Power App. There are some workflows behind it. We have permissions within these screens here. We need additional functionality like reporting, exporting, PDF, etc. So we decided to do a custom application. In that case, it was a ASP.NET Core application with Angular framework and a SQL Server behind it. So today, I have to say I'm happy we didn't do it with Power Apps because it would have been too complex. So that's just a small sample that you always have to evaluate. Does it make sense to do a Power Apps, or maybe I go another approach because the application is too complex? Okay, with that, I would say let's come to the second part here. So let me check if there are any questions in here. Not now, as far as I see. So I simply continue with my second part, governance. So you as an IT administrator want to see how is it going with my Power Apps, with my flow, what is happening in here. So IT governance usually helps you as administrator to monitor and to control the services, or at least what the users do with the services, what kind of applications they do, how they are categorized, what data they can use, and so on. So governance in the Microsoft 365 world is huge. So if you look at the Microsoft 365 services and you want to say, I want to do governance for Microsoft 365, well, that sounds nicely, but you have a lot of, or let me put it this way, every solution, every service, every product of Microsoft has a history, like SharePoint, for example, or like Teams. So if you want to do governance for Teams, you go to the Teams admin center and you can create your policies for saying only members of a specific group can create a new team, can provision a new team, for example, and so on. The next thing, SharePoint. SharePoint is old. It's 20 years old. The same goes with Exchange. So you have to do specific governance for SharePoint, for example, or you have to train your users with ACM to say, okay, you did work until now you worked in that system, now you work in a new system, and this is how the new system works and how you put in your data, how you modify it, and so on. Also, we have identity and access, like audit log controls, risky sign-ins, conditional access, and so on. So there's a governance for every of these services here. We are here currently interested in the governance for Power Platform. I have this slide in here just to show you, well, there's governance not only working for our Power Platform, but also for the other services as well. So my best practices for governance for the Power Platform. First of all, what we saw in the first part was use the admin center to configure your environments. Develop an environment strategy to say, okay, I have 5 environments, and the first environment is just for development, the second environment is for production, and so on. Also, what we saw, the policies for connectors, you should define them best before people start creating their Power Apps. Of course, it's also important to switch on the audit processes, which means activity logs. So if you go to the protection center, protectionoffice.com, there you can switch on the activity logs, because all that data there is protocolled. If a user creates a new application, if an application is locked or lost, deleted or something like this, this is if you turn it on in the activity logs, and you can connect to these logs and work with that data as well. that's also important, the onboarding of makers and champions, which means in your organization, define responsible persons for a specific environment or for an application or something like this, to always have a contact person and say, okay, you're responsible for the development environment, or you're responsible for another environment or policy or something like this. And the last part, my best practice here is the Power Platform Center of Excellence Starter Kit. We will have a look at that in some minutes here. I just wanted to show you what Microsoft recommends. So here, sorry for switching over, but I just wanted to provide the link here. This is one suggestion Microsoft has to say, okay, if you define environments, this is one approach what you could do. I took the graphic just from here to say, okay, I have the default environment, which I unfortunately cannot really configure because everybody can create a Power App or a flow in that. But maybe we should rename that environment to something like playground in my organization or something like this, so that it's clear that it's not supported to create or to run an application in here. From my perspective, this is not a good decision, but Microsoft wants to make it easy for every user to create applications and flows so they land in the default environment, as well as applications you create in here. So if I go to my device order, for example, if I open the Power Apps and I click on Customize Form, and I've already done this here for this list, you can see I customized this form here. That's done with the Power App, and this let's say Power App for the list device order is located in the default environment. Okay, it's also a good idea to create a developer environment, and depending on the sensitivity of the data or the applications that are stored in here, you could do workflows like saying I have an environment with a critical project development, and I have a test environment, and I have a production environment. Well, that's maybe useful for very large organizations. What was announced at the Ignite 1 or 2 weeks ago was that Azure CI/CD pipelines are now supported for the deployment process of Power Apps. I personally have not checked it out, but it's a very interesting thing to automate the deployment of Power Apps and flows. Okay, with that, let's have a look at the next topic, which is PowerShell. So you define your environments, you define the permissions for that. How can you automate specific things with PowerShell? And I have a very nice demo for that. I just have to open that and navigate to the right directory here on my other screen. Just takes a moment. I haven't opened it before, so here we go, which is this here. Okay, if you want to work with PowerShell, you can do it with the PowerShell modules. So let me increase that a little bit. So I hope this is better readable here. First of all, you have to install the modules from the PowerShell gallery. They are called Power Apps Administration PowerShell and Power Apps PowerShell. These include the most common commandlets, and there are some more commandlets in the Power Apps checker, which is, from my perspective, not so necessary, but these two have to be installed. And once you install them, you can use them. There's one important thing I want to point out. This requires PowerShell version 5. So you can see it here in the bottom corner, sorry, in the bottom right corner, the Show PowerShell Session menu 5.1, which means they only run in this environment and not compatible with the .NET Core environment currently. But you can run them in an Azure Automation account as well. So I've already done this. The next part is, how do I log in? Well, with this here. So I run this Add Power Apps account here, and this always opens in the background, or here it is. So now I need to sign in. So I do this quickly. I just move it to the other side, and I have multi-factor for that. So let me quickly type my username and my password. the last part, my MFA. Okay, so here we go. I've approved the sign-in request. It just obviously takes a moment. Try face again, face ID. So, okay, I'm now authenticated. How can I access data from here? So I have another script that's called modify app roles, and let's have a look at this here. First of all, I want to get all the environments that are existing in my Office 365 tenant. So this here gives me the list of the environments. We see our dev environment, COE, TP demo, and so on. If I want to work with a specific environment, if it's the default environment, I could use this here, minus or -default. In my case, I want to work with that environment here, which is the development environment. So I simply run this here. Please give me this environment here. So now I have the environment more or less in my hand. Environment, we just type it correctly. Environment. So, was there a typo? Come on, I run it again. So here we go. So here are the properties of this environment. When was it last modified? Who is the owner of that? What kind of environment is it? It's sandbox and so on. What I need here is the ID to work with that environment later. So I need to extract the ID. So if I run the environment, come on, environment, I think I simply copy that here. So just that you see how I can extract the ID here. So the ID is stored in this property here, but I need just the end of that, the GUID of that. So this is what I do here. Oops. I split that that string here that provides Microsoft Business Applications, blah, 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 to get the ID. And now I can say, I want to give me all the applications that are stored in this environment here. So let me do this here, apps equals get admin power app where object, just all the applications that are in that development environment here. So we are currently reading that here, and I store it in the $apps object here, so I can now do a full table of that, and these are the applications that are stored in that environment. So we see our device order 2, power app test, Sidekick demo, and so on. So of course, it's a good idea if you want to work with that and do your own, let's say, governance toolkit. You could do it with PowerShell and then say, okay, I run this and then I store the information in a CSV file, for example. So if I look at that, then I have a list and I can use, for example, Power BI to work with that data here. So that's very useful from my perspective. So currently these are the applications. There are 12 applications. Let's have a look here. If I go to the Power Apps and to my dev environment and to the applications in here. So these are the 12 applications we currently see in our PowerShell here. So where are we? Somewhere here in my Visual Studio Code. So here we go. Okay, if I want to work with a specific app, I can simply filter that. So in my case, let's have a look here. We have an application going back like my, let's say let's take the demo app 3, for example. So this demo app 3 belongs to Martina Grom. She's the owner of that application. So imagine Martina leaves the company and I want to change the owner because Martina is no longer active. The account has been blocked or deleted. I want to hand over that demo app 3 here to another user. So how can I do that? Well, I can't do it here in the GUI. I cannot do it in the Power App Studio here. I have to do it with PowerShell or other ways. And this is a scenario which I have in here. So I say, please, I want to work with this demo app 3 here. So let's filter that here. That's my app. I now have the ID of the my app here. That's D47 and so on. And now I can use the get admin power app to get the application. And then I say I want to get the permissions for that application. I simply run this here. So I pipe that information from the application to the get admin Power App role assignment. And I say I'm just interested in the properties, principal name, principal object ID, and so on. And this gives me a very nice list. And I say, okay, there are two owners for that, Martina Grom and Toni Pohl. And Martina, she's currently the owner of that application. How can I change that? Well, I can do that by saying, I have another user, and here you could use Azure ESET Powershell module to look up the ID of a specific user. I've already done that here, hard-coded. So I say, this is the new user. The user is Bianca Pisani. And I now simply say, I want to change the permissions for that application. And I simply add that user ID as a principal object ID here and say, okay, this application, the user can edit permission here. So I simply run this here. That would be my first step to give permission to Bianca. And the last step here would be, I now change the owner to Bianca. I do it with the set admin Power App owner. So I run this here. Okay, if this here worked, this would be the code to remove a user from a specific app. That's the remove admin Power App and so on. I simply check it again, the last part here. So I see that there are now 3 persons having access to that, and you can see that Bianca Pisani demo is now owner of this application. Let's have a look in our browser here. So I simply refresh that page here in that environment, and we should see that we have now the device, the demo app 3, which is on top now because it was modified 30 seconds ago. Now Bianca Pisani demo is the owner of this application. So that's a very typical use case, and PowerShell is perfect for that, for managing your environments, your applications in here. Okay, so with that, let's come to the last part here. I see there's still no questions here. So the last part that's important from a governance perspective are tools. And one of these tools is the Center of Excellence. So the Center of Excellence is a tool that's provided by Microsoft. It's an add-on for the Power Platform. You can install it for free, and you get it from the COE Starter Kit download URL. And the full description how you can deploy that to your tenant is in the COE Starter Kit URL. So let me show you that. So let's go. I think I have it here, so I don't need to type it. COE. It should be something like COE, but here it is. So this is the starting page for that tool here. And here's the download, and there's some guidance how to use it. So this is the setup process. Get started with the setup if you want to install this Center of Excellence Starter Kit, and you have to go through that. So it's extensive. So I've two things I want to point out here. One thing, it's very useful to install the COE Starter Kit. I will show you in the next minutes what you can do with that Starter Kit. The second thing is you need time. You need to have a global administrator, and it takes some hours to set it up. So it's not really like a setup next, finish. You have to do some things like create an application in the Azure Active Directory, set it up, and so on. So how does it look like? Let me go to the presentation for 1 or 2 minutes. Demo, how does it work? So what does it do? Well, we have the environments where all the flows, Power Apps, connectors, and policies are in here. And this Center of Excellence takes the data out of that environment and stores the data in a common data service. So this means the environment, and it's recommended to create an own environment for the Center of Excellence Starter Kit, must have the CDS enabled. So it collects the data, stores it in that CDS. What does it do? Well, it more or less categorize this data and provide some applications and flows that you can use to get the information. How is the data used? How are Power Apps used? How are flows used? What kind of connectors do I have? What kind of virtual Power Agents do I have, etc. So you get that information in the COE Admin Center. You get a bunch of applications, Power Apps, a bunch of flows, which you can use to get the information above for your Office 365 tenant. You could also connect to that CDS with custom applications and create your own tools. You also get a Power BI dashboard for that, for example. What does it do? What else does it do? Well, for example, it informs you as an administrator about applications that are orphans, for example. So, well, this application doesn't have an owner, or this application hasn't been used in the past 6 months for something like this, and you get emails for that. And also the owners get emails for that. And what it also provides, it's a very nice feature. I like that very much. It allows you to automatically archive, or it allows the owner of an application, if it's unused, to archive that flow or Power App to a SharePoint site, to a document library. So it creates it removes the solution from the environment and puts it into a document library so that it's more or less archived. So you could use it later, but it's no longer in the productive system. So how does it look like? So I have a directory here. It's this one, and in here I have the starter kit downloaded. And the starter kit consists of some parts here, and there are core components, nurture components, and so on. And you see they're simply zip files. So you can go to your let's close this here. You can, go in here and go to the admin center. The best recommendation here would be to create an own environment, and I already did that here. It's called Center of Excellence, COE. And this environment has the Common Data Service enabled. In my case, it's of type sandbox. And if I look back to my Make Power Apps and I switch to that environment here, what's included in the Center of Excellence? Well, there are some applications in here, as you can see, App Catalog, Power Platform, Starter App, and so on. And we have some flows in here, which collect the data. And we also get a Power BI, so let me open that here. It's this one here, you can download it as well, and you can deploy that to your Power Apps, Power BI Power BI Center. So while we wait for the loading of the Power BI, let's have a look at the App Catalog. Oh, sorry, actually I want to go to the Developer Compliance Center first. So that also is a Power App. Again, it's powered by CDS, and this gives me an overview of all the apps that are in my environment. So let's wait for the loading here. And these apps here are, let's say, categorized. You can see a small icon here, like a black one, a red one, a green one, and so on, or a yellow one. This means developers, or you're the creator of an application, please categorize your application. And I then know as administrator what kind of application it is and if it's business critical. So for example, I have a green application that's called Travel Request. So these are all like in SharePoint meta information you can add to your application and say, okay, this application here is an important application. It has the business impact is important. The maker requirement, it's whatever, confidential and so on, because let's say I have HR data in it or something like this. So you can categorize that application here. And then you can more or less get a list of all the applications and see, okay, what is critical in my organization? Again, it's a level on top of the Power Platform in the data stored in the CDS, and I can more or less use that data for my applications here. So let's have a look at the Power Platform admin view. That's maybe another very nice application here, because I get a dashboard, or actually I get multiple dashboards for my application. So here you see, okay, what kind of environments do I have in that tenant here? So I have, for example, a TP demo environment, and there are 46 apps in here and 21 flows. Then I have the default environment, which has less applications, but more flows, for example, and so on. So you get a very quick overview, and this is interactive. And you can also drill down here. This is also very nice. You can see the top makers. In my case, for example, I created most of the applications here, and then there are not so many other makers for Power Apps and for flows, for example. And if I go to the apps, I get a list of all the applications in my tenant and the information in which environment is this application stored, who is the owner, when was it last modified, last launched. And this is very important information about the usage of my applications. What's also nice here, I can export that list to Excel for further usage, for example. So, and you get the same information for flows, for example, all the flows that are in that tenant, about the environments here, which connectors are used. That should also include our custom connectors here. What kind of chatbots do I have? So I have currently 2 chatbots in that environment. These are virtual bots. And the audit logs. You have to turn that on in the protectionoffice.com admin center so that you see, okay, when was an application launched, for example, who are the makers, etc. So that's just one application here out of the many. So that was the Power Platform admin view. For example, you could also use the set add permissions at Power App. This is more or less the same what I did with PowerShell. So if you say the user has left the organization, I want to change the owner of that application. So let's have a list of owners, for example, and you see, okay, all the applications that Tony has made, and then you see all the applications in which environment, and you can say, okay, I change permissions or add permissions to that. So that's also a very nice feature set here. The same goes here with flows. And the flows are more or less deployed manually here. So you see the Center of Excellence has a lot of flows here. And we have that is installed with the solutions. So if I go to the solutions here, you can create your own solutions, but these solutions are simply imported. So the idea here is to simply select one of the zips, import it, select one of the zips, then you get the solution. The solution is nothing else. If I look at the governance components, for example, then a list of flows and apps and environment variables. So if you wonder, okay, I've said before, an email is created to the owner of the application. Do you still want to use that app? Then you define that in who gets that here in the environment variables, for example. So here's, for example, the archive folder. Let me show you that quickly. I have a site that's called COE. So, and open my inbox here. So I simply move that to my other screen once I've selected my Center of Excellence folder here. So I get emails from that Center of Excellence like this here. Your user application app has been flagged for archiving, or take another one, maybe an old one. Yeah, this one. Driver's log app demo. You can see I got an email because I was the owner of this application with that name here, and it hasn't been modified since 2017. You see I started early. So I now can say I approve that or I reject that archiving process because it has been flagged for archiving. Hey, well, this application is no longer used. Do you still want to use it, or do you want to move it to the archive? So if I say, yes, please archive this application here, then a flow takes that application, removes it from the environment. And now let's go back to this here, to this SharePoint site, and I go to the site contents. I have a document library that's called archive with 6 items in it. And if you look into this, you will see there are some applications I already archived some time ago, like Power Order App Demo 2, Card Preview, and so on. So now my driver's log will also be archived in here the next time this flow runs. Of course, I can run it anytime by going to my Power App here, to my flows here, and simply run that flow that does this archiving, which is, I think, this here, archival doc library in SharePoint or so. So this is the basic idea here. And the last part I want to show here is how the Power BI looks like, because we can also use that here, that you can download it and it comes out of the box, more or less. You just have to connect it to your data source, to your CDS. So here it is. Hopefully. It takes some time to load, but this comes also with the Center of Excellence here, that you can customize the data from the CDS that is collected from the Center of Excellence, and you see more or less similar data what we saw in the Power Apps, but it's more or less all in one. So I like this Power BI dashboard very much because it gives you a very nice overview of all the components that are stored in your environment or in your tenant. You see here the logo, which is one of the environment variables. When was it last refreshed? And then you see all the risk assignments. So for example, if I select this one here, then I should get, I see how many users have been using this application, and maybe I clicked too fast here. So here is, I get an H score. Oops, sorry. I get an H score for that application. How was it used? How often has it been launched? When did it last run? And so on. So that's very useful, and you can see the various categories here. So the dashboards like app usage, for example. How are my apps used here? Just as another visualization, so you can see this application here has been used most. And then we have other applications that have been used not very often, set new app owner, for example, and so on. And the same goes for flows, which flows have been archived, makers, flow details, which kind of bots do I have, and so on. So this is a very, very nice playground, and I really recommend to have a look at the Center of Excellence to see how is it going in your environment. Okay, with that, I think I'll come to an end here. I've been talking so much. This is just some screenshots how this looks like. That's included in my presentation. So one thing I want to mention here, if you plan your governance, we usually do it in 3 phases. You can see the green check mark here in the top right corner. First of all, you should analyze and plan your environment. So define what kind of environments you want to use in your organization. Communicate that would be the phase 3 to your users, to say, so that every user knows in which environment he should create an application or a flow. And also we have these tools like PowerShell, for example, or the Center of Excellence, which is really highly recommended from my side to implement that in your environment. And this usually takes some hours for the first time. If you do it for the second, third time, it's faster, of course. You should do it with an app. You should maybe create a service account for that. So I would recommend, if you plan to configure the Center of Excellence, first do it in a demo tenant, have a look how it looks, how it works. And once you have done that, then do it in production mode in your own tenant. Okay, my summary here is what I just said. Please develop your strategy, your governance plan. Choose the tools. There are also other nice tools out there. So, for example, one tool was formerly called Flow Studio. I think it's now Power Platform Studio, something like this, from our MVP colleague John Liu. This is a very nice tool. He also offers it for free for communities. Use the Admin Center, turn on the auditing, have a look at PowerShell if you're interested in that, because it simplifies your life. It really makes it easier to manage typical tasks. And again, the Center of Excellence Starter Kit is an excellent choice to play around with that. Okay, my last part here is just if you want to connect with me or with my colleague Martina. She just came into the office, so she will join us in a minute or so. This is our contact data. And with that, I hope this was useful. And yeah, we are open for any questions here. So I think Martina is also here.
Hi, Martina.
Hey.
All right, everyone, if you've got any questions, post them in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. Now's the chance to get some feedback or further information.
If you want, we can provide the slide deck to you, Rene, and you can share it then.
Yeah, that would be perfect, and I'll share it through our meeting. Okay, maybe a short question from me. I know the COE because we are actually implementing it right now, or basically we put it online. We're still working on the processes, and we're a very large company with around 40,000 accounts. We've got more than 1,300 apps, so there's a lot for us to discover and do.
Wow.
From your point of view, actually, is there a minimum company size where, say, the COE makes sense, and below that it might be actually, I don't know, overkill or so. Is there any recommendation from your side?
I personally like it because, well, we have maybe a different environment because we are a small company. We are only 20 persons, and even we have it, but it's mostly to show our customers. So because, in small companies, you can simply go to a colleague and say, well, what kind of apps have you deployed? What are they doing? Show them to me or something like this. In large companies, this isn't possible in that way. So I wouldn't say it's really a minimum size of the company, but it's, from my perspective, it's useful.
And I also think that a minimum governance is useful for any organization side. So this is what I learned with my customers, because we have some customers who only have a tenant with 25 users, but they need a lot of governance here. So it kind of depends. If you want to have some basic governance in your tenant, then I would recommend to implement it anyway.
But you're right, Rene, it's a lot of effort.
It's a lot of effort, yes.
It takes a day maybe for the first time.
Yeah, well, it takes some time to set up. Once it's running, then you discover a lot of things that you didn't even realize beforehand, which gives
and then it takes a time to clean that up.
So we discovered, for example, a lot of apps that don't have any owner anymore, and we need to figure out who's actually responsible for that app or what's the purpose of that app. We discover, I don't know, a lot of new environments which we didn't fully realize how many there were. We didn't realize how many apps overall there are, etc., etc. So it basically helps to give you that big overview of what's going on in your environment, and that leads you then to more activity. So again, once it's there, it doesn't mean that your work is done, but rather it continues in other ways.
Well, to be honest, I think Microsoft should provide a more easy way, because the Center of Excellence is a lot of work to install. But, well, let's see what happens in the future, because actually every administrator will be interested. What you said, how many environments do I have? How many applications do I have? Which are orphaned applications, and so on. So actually, you should more or less answer that with a click on a button or something like this with your report. But that's not the case currently. So you have to have tools like the Center of Excellence.
Good. Does anyone else have any questions or any feedback? Just quickly checking. Yeah, no, I think nothing else then. Yeah, thank you so much, Toni and Martina. It was very informative. It was a great overview. I was very happy to have you presenting here. Having said that, then just checking some more comments. But yeah, thank you from everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, was happy to have you here, and hopefully we'll get to see each other in person again at some point.
Oh, yeah. That would be great.
Some point soon, actually, at some point.
It will take a while, Rene.
Okay, great. Good. So the next thing we'll do right now is let's thinking. No, I'm just gonna jump straight into my own quick session. So Martina, Toni, if you want to stay, you feel free to stay. If you want to go back to work, or I don't know, go back to the lake or something like that, you can leave, of course, as well.
Unfortunately, it's work, but yeah. Thanks again, and yeah.
See you soon. Thank
you.
See
you soon.
Okay,
thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, then I'm quickly sharing my screen now. Just give me a second. I lost my Teams. There it is. So as you know, Microsoft Ignite, Microsoft's biggest conference covering all things Microsoft, took place around 2 weeks ago. There were a lot of new announcements for all the products, for all the services. What I want to do is I want to give a short overview, a short summary of the main announcements and new functionalities in SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, and generally Office or Microsoft 365. So obviously I won't cover everything that was announced. I will not cover those things that were announced and which I'll talk about in a lot of detail, because again, many things you could say are not available yet. So sometimes we don't have details yet, and sometimes it also means then, yeah, you want to look at more details. It will take some time actually to also review it with more information. Having said that, let me just get started, guide you through. So come on, here we go. One quick note, there are a lot of resources out there regarding what happened at Ignite. The two main resources from Microsoft are the Book of News, where they provide a quick summary, including a lot of links then to everything that they announce, whether it's now within Azure, within Microsoft 365, or any of their other areas. And on the Ignite 2020 website, so myignite.microsoft.com, you can also access a lot of on-demand sessions and access the slide decks. So if you are interested in reviewing a specific session in detail, again, you can log in and you can have a look at a session then. There are really some sessions where I think it makes sense, and you will get to see some announcements from those sessions in a minute. There are also 3 further links here to some other summaries and roadmap slides collection. So that's again for further reference. I'll share that slide deck after, actually not just after the call. Let me just put it right into the chat here. Here we go. So you can already look at it, download it, do whatever you want with it. This mini slide deck. Important thing here is this first, or basically second slide here with the links to those resources. All right, let's look at the announcements. So main product with the most and biggest and most exciting announcements might have been Microsoft Teams. Obviously, Microsoft has been investing a lot of time and effort into Teams, adding a lot of new features this year, improving a lot of things, and they don't stop. Obviously, things will continue at that pace, it seems. So a lot of things were announced, for example, including that regular Teams meeting, which we are in right now, which currently support up to 300 members. Those plus the Teams live events, which support up to 20,000 participants, but function slightly differently. They are sort of merging into one experience. So you can soon have very large meetings within Teams with up to 1,000 participants. That's going to happen before the end of this year. But the long-term idea is then, yeah, there will no longer be a very clear differentiation between the Teams meeting and the live events, but rather you will be able to set up basically a very large event, even if you've got 15,000 participants as an example. So right now, 2 different sort of events. In the future, there will be one kind of event. Separately, Microsoft Teams will support Teams. That should have been a capital T here, with up to 25,000 members. I forgot the current limit right now, so there's a couple thousand that you can add. The idea is then that you can add a team where you can add, depending on the company size, the whole company, or maybe a region or a certain department, something like that, basically, but really a lot of people. So while most teams are relatively small because they're very focused for a specific small size department or for a project or an initiative or so, soon you will also have very, very large teams where you can basically add the whole company, let's say that way. One other thing here, which is actually available to me right now, is Meeting Spotlight. Choose the video that is shown to all attendees. Let me just move over here. Yeah, I saw it earlier and I lost it again. I think because I'm the only one with a video right now. It's a functionality that's available right now already, at least for me. Others should have received it as well, meaning when you've got a lot of videos on screen, for example, you can highlight one of those videos and have it shown then to all attendees. So that's important, for example, when you've got a couple of people talking, presenting, but you might then want to actually just put the spotlight really on one of those people. So a meeting improvement coming our way might be already available for you. And one other important thing here at the bottom, we'll come back to recordings, etc., and videos in Office 365 later. But one important thing is meeting recordings currently get stored in Microsoft Stream. So when a session is presented or when a meeting is held and it gets recorded, that recording gets stored in Microsoft Stream. So Microsoft's video platform in Office 365. In the very near future, it was supposed to be here right now, but it's coming later this month actually. You will be able to define that meeting recordings should be stored in OneDrive or SharePoint instead. So for example, when you have a recording inside, when you have a meeting inside of a team and you record that, so this recording would then be stored in the corresponding SharePoint side of that team as an example. The big benefit of that is then also that you will then be able to share those recordings more easily with others. Right now, for example, with Microsoft Stream, sharing recordings is, for example, not easily possible if you want to share it with externals. They don't have access to Stream. But if the video is stored in OneDrive or SharePoint, that's when you could then share it with somebody from the outside. So from another organization, be it a client or customer or something like that. All right, next thing that's coming our way are custom layouts. So we are in a presentation here right now. If I wanted to actually show up here on the screen as well, in the future, I could change the custom layout and you would see me as an overlay of the current presentation. So instead of having the current relatively simple layout that's available, soon there will be a few more layouts available, allowing you more presentation modes. And you see here there are two presentation or two layouts available right now, one with a very large preview, one with a smaller preview, and a small sidebar with the videos, additional information on the side. So again, that's also coming later this year. One thing that's available right now, which you might be able to see already, is Together Mode, meaning when you're in a meeting with a couple of people, they turn on the video, you can turn on Together Mode instead of having a crit view. You will then be seated in that auditorium. The one on the right side, you see here, there are a couple of screens or scenes. The auditorium is the one that's currently the default and the only one available. Soon there will be a few more options available as well. Also coming, again, sometime later this year is the idea. I think it's getting rolled out right now. I've seen it already appearing. I don't have it here right now, but I've seen it elsewhere, are breakout rooms. So that was very important, for example, for the education sector, but others might also be interested if you organize an event and you're in a meeting with a couple of people, but you want to basically split up for some time. You can create breakout rooms, define how many rooms you want, define who should be assigned to which room, should it be randomly or should it be basically you define who should go where. You can then basically send those people to those rooms in a way. They are then in separate individual meetings. And once you're done, you can close it again and you'll get back together in the big meeting room. So that might be something like, oh, you want to have, for example, you've got 40 people. You might create then 5 different rooms, 8 people in each room so that they can have smaller discussions in between.
What time are you?
Time now is 8:55. All right, so my daughter wants me to finish the presentation, but there's still a bit to go. Another meeting improvement is right now, when we're holding a meeting like this one, there's something happening in the meeting chat. There might be a recording. There might be, again, some notes we're taking, etc. Getting all that together afterwards is a bit of a manual effort. Very soon you will be able then to see it all in one big screen. So you can see who was part of that meeting, who joined, who didn't. You will be able to access any recordings, transcript, note, etc. Everything related to that meeting will then be part of that meeting recap, all in one big screen. So that can really help you easily get everything in one place after the meeting, instead of trying to get it together from the different locations. Right now, when you create a team, well, you can create a team that's either private or public. What you will soon be able to do is actually create those teams based on templates. So that was announced already some time ago, but the idea is then when you create a team and after you decided whether it's public or private, you can then also say what kind of template you want to use. Do you want to use a project-based template, for example, or some other template? You will be able to select basically from a couple of default templates, but administrators will also be able then to share and create obviously their own templates. So you could, within your own company, create your own, again, project template as an example when you want to specify certain things that should be part of every project team or so, or you could create your own team for any initiative, something like that. So you can define the channels that are in there, what kind of tabs are to be used, etc., etc. Another very big announcement, which is a bit tricky to cover in just one slide, so I recommend that you look it up separately in the separate announcements, showing you in much more detail what's going on. There are a much better and tighter integration between Teams and the Power Platform, so specifically then Power Apps and Power Virtual Agents. So on the left side here, we see then you will be able to create apps directly within Teams, building upon what you already have within Power Apps, but you can do everything from within Teams and supporting basically your team directly from there. So you will no longer have to basically create an app outside of Teams and then connect it to your team somewhere, but rather you do everything directly within Teams. And that's just one of those improvements that are coming our way. Additionally, Power Virtual Agents, which are already available, will also be tightly integrated so that you can then create your own agent directly from within Teams as well. You can let your agent learn a bit, your chatbot basically, teach it a few things and then publish it to your team. Think of, for example, a help desk bot or an FAQ bot or a support bot. That's something you will be able to create very easily, relatively soon as well. Announcement for Teams and SharePoints, and it was a very big announcement, is something that's coming soon is also the home site app. So that's going to be something you can put into Teams on the left side, basically bringing your intranet, which is usually already in SharePoint usually. You can bring that into Teams as well, but you don't have to basically add it into a team in Teams somewhere or so, but rather access it directly from the, as you can see here, from the left side, the nav bar, and basically share it with everybody in your organization easily. So people don't have to go somewhere else to access the internet, but the idea is then really Teams becomes your central hub for everything, for any work that you're doing, but you can also then access again your intranet, review any news, etc., etc. More details on that will also be coming soon. It's not available yet, but again, one of those things that we will get to see in hopefully a couple of weeks, hopefully not in a couple of months or so. Okay, so that were some of the Teams announcements. There were a couple more. If you're interested in some device improvements, there were a couple more coming our way. But again, I refer you to the corresponding other presentations and slides. For SharePoint, we see here again the intranet in the background, but what's coming is also the SharePoint app bar. So that means then you will have a global navigation bar on the left-hand side of all your SharePoint sites. So administrators can then define what's part of that app bar. And you can see, for example, here, oh, you'll have My News dynamically shown here on the left side. So you don't have to go to the intranet on the homepage to look at the news, but you can see it already directly from wherever you are basically and access it from that app bar. That will be manageable by administrators, customizable a bit, but the idea is then you've got that global navigation. And navigation, usually people think it's going to be at the top, but in this case, think about it, it's going to be at the left side. 10 minutes. For administrators, there'll also be some smaller improvements. They're not dramatic, I would say. Right now, when you go to the SharePoint Admin Center, you'll get to see some nice charts and graphs there. In the future, very near future, it will be similar to the general Microsoft 365 Admin Center, where you will have those cards basically showing you what you're actually interested in. So you'll see here on the left side, for example, you have some cards showing you issues, active users, you can do a site search, a lot of other things. You can also customize it and say, oh, what am I specifically interested in? Maybe in file activity or site usage or other things. So you define really what you want to see on that SharePoint Admin Center homepage, instead of relying on what's available there right now and maybe jumping into separate areas. Again, you customize it and define again what is shown there and what you're interested in. One thing that's available already right now is a migration tool. So earlier this year, Microsoft acquired Mover.io, which allows you to migrate online content into SharePoint Online and OneDrive. There'll be a much tighter integration and an easier access from the SharePoint Admin Center. Right now, when you open it, basically it brings you over to the Mover.io website. In the future, you will see a lot of things happening directly here in the Admin Center. So you see all the migration that are taking place, what the status is, how many files have been migrated. You can start your own new migrations from, for example, Box, Dropbox, or other locations, and get that content over into SharePoint Online. That's one of those improvements that I'm personally excited for. A lot of companies have a lot of content in other locations, but they want to bring it over into SharePoint Online very often. And Microsoft provides that capability then to do it all directly out of the box, where you don't need a third-party migration tool, at least for the more simple scenarios. One thing that's happening, or the current setup is like the OneDrive Admin Center right now is a bit separate, so it's not part of the SharePoint Admin Center, but doesn't fully make sense because OneDrive obviously and SharePoint are very closely related. So small announcement here, OneDrive is coming over into the SharePoint Admin Center. So a lot of the things that you're currently doing in a separate admin center will then be in the SharePoint Admin Center as well. A very exciting feature coming to OneDrive is that add to OneDrive functionality. So if somebody shares a folder with you, so a colleague shares a folder with you from his OneDrive, you can access it in your shared with me area in OneDrive, but then it's always a bit, separate. You forget about it, even though it might be important, or you always need to move there separately. You will soon be able then to basically add that shortcut to your own OneDrive. And you can see here that's happening. Once you do that, the shortcut will be accessible directly in your My Files, so your OneDrive direct location. I heard that it's getting rolled out right now, if I'm not wrong. I think I've seen some reports already. It didn't show up for me yet, but it should hopefully be arriving to us very soon. I think this is not one of the features that we have to wait a couple of months for, but rather a few more weeks, and it should be there. So one other very big thing that we've seen was Microsoft Stream is moving, the recordings from Microsoft Teams are moving to SharePoint and OneDrive, where you will be able to save them. And generally speaking, Microsoft is working on revamping Microsoft Stream. Instead of having the separate platform, they are moving it to SharePoint in a way. So they're leveraging the existing functionality that's available in SharePoint and enhancing it with some of the stream capabilities so that you can stream properly, that it gets delivered in high quality wherever you are, etc. Basically bringing both of those things together. So on the left side, you see, for example, how it could look like, or most likely will look like when Stream is over in the SharePoint environment. It will look still quite similar to what we have right now, but it will also basically allow you to leverage certain functionalities that are available in SharePoint right now. So one thing that will be much better in the near future is then, for example, to have certain video sites that will be part of SharePoint. So you've got your, for example, on the right side, we can see we've got trending videos, we've got some video lists, etc. They're part of Stream so far, but you can bring that over to SharePoint in the near future. Plus, SharePoint and OneDrive already provide you with analytics. So you see some analytics on how many people access the site, etc. Analytics in Stream are, let's call it, close to non-existent. So you see some smaller numbers like 53 people accessed it, but that's about it. So analytics is also one of those things coming our way.
How much longer?
5 minutes. So my daughter wants me to get done. I'm rushing through, but I'm not fast enough, it seems. SharePoint syntax. Let me just stop sharing, start sharing. I think I forgot my system audio. All right, because I've got a video here, I quickly want to play. So Microsoft announced Project Cortex, when was that? I think a year ago, approximately, basically saying we want to bring the power of AI to, for example, SharePoint. We don't just want to have some simple systems anymore. We want to be able to get more insights out of what we have. We want our environments to be smarter. We want to be able to parse documents, get information out of those documents in a more intelligent way. So the idea is with all the document and other content-based information you already have, you should be able to work with it in a better, smarter way. And the first thing that they now actually announced and now also published, available as of 1st of October, is SharePoint Syntax. So let me just play this video here.
Today, I'm pleased to introduce the latest innovation. SharePoint Syntax, coming to customers next month. Syntax applies AI to amplify individual human expertise to convert content into knowledge at scale for the entire organization. And to show you how, let me introduce Naomi. Naomi, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jeff. In any organization, people spend inordinate amounts of time combing through content to find and process information. Take a specialized skill like contract processing, for example. Your contract processing expert can teach Syntax to read a contract like they do, to recognize that key information and automatically tag contracts. Syntax lets your experts capture their knowledge about content in AI models that they can build with no code. For an example, an expert can teach Syntax to extract the value of a contract, along with the expiration date and key terms and conditions. Syntax then uses your model to automatically process content and capture that important information as metadata. That's the columns that we see here. Metadata is critical to finding and managing content. For example, you can compare and contrast the terms and conditions across all the contracts in your organization. You can use the knowledge unlocked from contracts to manage processes, like identifying which contracts are expiring and then routing them for renewal. And you can use it automatically to apply sensitivity and retention labels based on the type of contract, dramatically reducing the security and compliance risk. And now you have a model that other contract specialists can use, and they can be more effective. Syntax builds on the foundational content services of SharePoint and mainstreams advanced AI capabilities from Azure, Microsoft Research, and Microsoft 365. Seamless integration with Power Automate and Microsoft Information Protection gives you content management superpowers, enabling you to capture, scale, and repurpose the expertise of your people.
All right, so that was a very short demo video from Microsoft, or announcement video. They were showing a much better, more exciting demo actually in the session. That's one of the sessions that I actually really recommend you to look at. So when you think about SharePoint, obviously you think about you were able to upload documents, then when you had metadata, you had to fill it in manually. What Syntax allows you then again, you upload, for example, a bunch of contracts, you train the model, and the model will then understand the structure of those contracts, and it will be able to extract the relevant information and add it to the basically as metadata to those files. Plus, you will then also be able to use, for example, Power Automate. I don't want to play the video anymore. to, for example, process it further, to act on it, etc. So we've seen part of that in that video, but again, I really highly recommend you watch the demo, the big session from Ignite on syntax. So it uses AI models so that you train your model, you teach it how your documents are structured. The content then gets processed whenever you upload new document. You can then again work with Power Automate to do further content-centric processes like approvals as an example, and you can do your content compliance and governance. So any security-related other actions you can also integrate here as well, such as, for example, sensitivity labels, etc. All right, so we're nearing the end. I've got one more slide, which is another announcement separately. You might have hopefully seen that as well. In 2 weeks, we're having our very big online conference, AOS Southeast Asia 2020. So we held AOS Singapore and AOS Kuala Lumpur in 2018 and 2019, in-person events at the corresponding Microsoft offices. Was very well received. Obviously, this year it's not possible to hold such kind of events, but that doesn't stop us from doing it in another way. So we're doing it online over 2 days. So instead of having just a one-day conference, this year we're having 2 days on a Friday and a Saturday. Feel free to join us. We would very gladly see you there. You can register for free. We've got 36 sessions over these 2 days covering IT pros, business developers, covering a lot of topics around Microsoft 365, SharePoint, Teams, Azure, Power Platform. So again, also a bit of Power Apps, for example. It's going to be completely online, so meaning you can access it from wherever you are, as long as you've got an internet connection. If you're in the office, if you're at home, if you're on the couch, on the bed, wherever you want, you can join us. We would love to see you there. And again, you register for free, you attend for free, and hopefully we'll get to see you there. Okay, so now I'm done. Is there anything else you probably want to ask or know? The slide deck has been shared. Tony also shared. That's great. Going on with my presentation. Here we go. If there are any questions, comments, again, unmute yourself, post it in the chat. Just see. Yeah. Other than that, next big event, as mentioned, is going to be in 2 weeks. Feel free also to share that event with any colleagues, friends, acquaintances, anybody you think might be interested. They do not have to be just in Singapore or in Malaysia or generally Southeast Asia. If you've got friends elsewhere, we hold the event in our time zone, obviously, from I think 9 to 5 each day. But other people are free to join us as well. We're happy to have anyone basically participating as attendees. All right. If there are no further comments, then I again hope to see you at AOS Southeast Asia, and information on our November event should also come out within the next 2 weeks. So that will be also again an online session. We're trying to get details covered for that relatively soon as well. Thank you everyone for coming today, and see you again hopefully later this month or latest next month.